My father thinks he can hide a secret from me, but he's incredibly wrong. I follow him as I see him sneaking out in the pitch black of night, and things don't end pretty. My name's Mr. Reddito, and today I have an incredibly shocking story for you. It's about a girl who finds out her father is hiding a secret, and this secret does become detrimental to the whole atmosphere of her life. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, and let's hop right into story number 1. I'm 21 female, and recently I've been living with both my mom and dad. However, we recently found out that my dad had a secret that he's been hiding for many years. It has left me with many questions and resentment towards him. A while, I could not sleep. I think it had something to do with the heat in the room, which does not have the proper ventilation. So then, I decided to go outside to get some air. But then, the lights in the corridor were on, which was strange because we usually let them go off. Especially considering the string of robberies happening in the area. I figured that maybe one of my parents had left them on. I switched them off, then went to the kitchen. However, I saw a shadow move past the kitchen window, and I got scared. I ran to my parents' house screaming, but my mother has always been a heavy sleeper. She was sleeping peacefully, and beside her there was no one. I thought maybe my dad was in the living room watching late-night football again, but when I checked, there was no one there. I went back to the kitchen to switch off the light, but then I heard the roar of an engine. I checked outside just in time to see my dad drive off. He was definitely not wearing his work clothes. I dismissed this strange occurrence and made my way back to my room. I thought that I would ask him what was going on tomorrow. However, when I asked him about it, he said that he had gone out for a drive because he could not sleep. He said that I should not tell my mother because, well, she would just make a fuss about it. For as long as I knew, my parents had always been happy. They never fought in front of me, and I had no knowledge of them not getting along. I knew my dad adored my mom and would never cheat on her. So that was the last thing I thought of. I told him just to get some sleeping pills if he's having trouble sleeping. It was dangerous for him to go outside. There's been crime waves in our neighborhood recently. However, by chance, I woke up again in the middle of the night. When I opened the door, he had his back to me, and he was getting into my parents' room. And his shoes left dirt where they stepped, which was a clear indication that he was going outside. I had a very bad feeling about whatever my father was getting up to do. I was no spy, but I was curious about my father and kept an eye on him for the next couple of days. He did not sneak out again, but he did seem very jumpy whenever his phone rang, or a message got sent to it. I hope that my father was not doing drugs or, worst of all, gambling. I had a few friends who had noticed such behavior in their fathers, and it was never good. And then, 2 weeks after I've been checking the corridor at the time he usually went out, he finally started sneaking out again. But this time, I was going to catch him in the act. I wore some dark clothes, took my phone, and left the house as soon as he did. I drove a bit behind him, making sure my lights were completely turned off. My car was dark and it did not stand out, so I was sure he did not see me. I followed him for a while until he stopped at an all-night diner. I parked across the street from the all-night diner and waited. Just when I was about to give up, thinking that he's just gone for a midnight snack, a girl came and sat across from him. She had a hoodie on, but when she took it off, I saw that she was around the same age as me. This was worse than I thought. Was my dad having an affair with a girl that looked barely legal? And then he slid something in an envelope over to her. Why was he giving her money? Was he her sugar daddy? To be honest, I felt nauseated when I watched the interaction. And then he hugged her and kissed her on the forehead before leaving. Multiple scenarios and possible reactions to the situation were running through my mind. I considered confronting him right then and there, but I could not bring myself to do it. I was feeling such anger and disgust. My dad prized himself on honesty and loyalty, and I learned early that he did not tolerate dishonesty. He was transparent with us about everything. If he really did not want my mother anymore, then why did he not just tell her? My mother did not deserve this. She was always a good person, and they were a team. I never thought there were difficulties in their marriage, but I was certain that there was so much that they did not tell me. I did not want my parents to separate because of a mere girl. I was going to find out who she was, and when I did, I was not sure what I would do. Before he even got up, I was driving home, dangerously close to the speed limit. I did not want him to know that I knew before my mom did. When I got home, I spent the whole night crying. My whole world was falling apart, and I did not know how to fix it. Who was this man who was cheating on my mom? With a young girl at that? All I could think about was how my mother was going to react if she would ever forgive him because, well, I wouldn't. I think that was when I started to doubt the idea of marriage. In public, they seemed to be a team, unable to have any flaws. But now I was seeing this, and it was not the truth. I considered telling my mom that very night, but I could not bring myself to be that kind of person. I'd taken a picture of them from afar, and it was a bit blurry, but it showed that my father was hugging the girl. The next morning, I decided to tell my mom everything. If I saw them, then it was only a matter of time till someone else did. It would be terrible for her to find out through someone else. I'd always been taught how to be honest, and which was probably hypocritical since my father was going against his values. So then I sat my mother down and told her the bad news about what I found out from the following day. At first, she did not believe me and asked me if I was dreaming it all up. I showed her the picture I took the previous night and watched as her face crumbled. She said that he had been acting strange for a few months now, but he said he was just tired from work. Naturally, we searched in their room to see if there was any evidence. There was nothing, except that there were receipts hidden in his work documents. They were from restaurants, and the bill was a lot more than one person. And then there were those from clothing shops. My father had not gotten himself just a mistress, it was a sugar baby. My mom never lost her control, at least not in front of me. But then she started crying, and I cried along with her. It was heartbreaking to think that my entire family was going to be broken apart by a girl who was the same age as me. My mother kept on asking herself if she was not enough, and how she would face everyone. But I reassured her that I was still with her, and together we would figure out a way forward. My mom left my dad a couple messages, telling him to come home immediately, but they did not go through, so we waited. And the more waited, the angrier my mom got. She took all the receipts, laid them down on the table, and then she went out for a cigarette, which she's quit years ago. I did not even try to stop her. I understood. She had stopped crying now and was pacing back and forth all the way around, saying things I did not understand, like how could my father do it again, and with a younger girl now. That led me to believe he's been unfaithful before. That was the day I lost respect for my father, but the affair he seemed to be having was the least of our troubles. Finally, my father came home in the evening. He asked what was for dinner. My mother told him to go and get food at the restaurant he frequented often. I never thought my mother was capable of being icy, but I saw another side of her on that day. My father asked where all this is coming from, then she asked how old the girl was he's sleeping with. Was she even legal? My dad told my mom to be ridiculous and asked me to leave the room so they could talk. I showed him the proof of his infidelity, and he reacted by acting as if it was not him in the picture. I told him to quit lying. I'd followed him the previous night, and how could he do this to my mother? Guys, nothing prepared me for the next words that he said. It's now ages since the whole thing happened, but it has not settled into my thoughts. My dad told me that the girl was indeed not his lover. She was my youngest sister. I told him to quit lying, it's not funny, and I was getting angry. I have problems with panic attacks. I have medication for it, but I'd not taken it that day. After I calmed down from shouting and screaming at me, he told us the truth. He and Mom had taken a break a year after I was born. He slept with his ex-girlfriend whom he dated before meeting my mom. He eventually got back together with my mom, but she moved on to another town. However, a few months ago, she contacted him telling him that he had a daughter. He did a DNA test and the results proved that indeed, the girl was 18 at the time and it was my sister. He had met her and started to develop a relationship with her, and he was not ready to tell us yet about her. My mother asked why he never told her that she slept with his ex, a woman who had hurt him so many times in the past. It felt a bit like I was intruding, but I could not leave. I could not leave my mom alone with him. She was shaking and terrible and crying a lot. My dad did say it was one mistake, and he did not mean to keep it a secret from us. The fact that I had a whole sister I knew nothing about was too much for me to comprehend. My mom asked him if he's gotten back together with that woman, but he said he was just taking care of his daughter. I ended up leaving the room and letting them argue. I took my dad's phone before leaving, and I don't know why I did it, but I guess I was curious to see what his relationship with her was like. The screaming in the other room was getting too much, and I could barely hear myself think. It took me a while, but I found both of them. The texts with the woman were not warm at all. She was demanding and a lot of money and asking what her daughter would eat if her father did not provide. And then with the girl, there were a few messages about where to meet up, but nothing much that stood out to me. She seemed to be acting sweet and nice to my dad. I admit, I was jealous. And then I did something. I guess I was just curious. I called her number on my dad's phone. She answered asking who it was. I could not speak and I ended up hanging up. My life was not the same. That night, my mother pretty much trashed his room and told him to go and sleep at his ex-girlfriend's house. Before he left, he tried to explain to me that he loved me, but I did not want to hear anything from him. When he left, I asked my mother why they had gone on a break. She said that his family had never accepted her, and when she had me, he was less supportive of us. She ended things for a while, but he came back and stood up for us against his family. That night, I fell asleep to the sounds of my mother crying, and I did not even know what to say to comfort her. But I hated that woman who had ruined my parents' relationship, as well as that girl who stole my father. Everything was a lie, and it would only get worse. My father called the phone multiple times, but we did not reply. My mother was in her room for days and refused to come out. It was like our roles were reversed, and I would come and give her food and take care of her. In the meantime, I was boiling with anger for my father. My father's family ended up coming to the house trying to make peace with my mom. They brought my father with them and I was told to leave. They were very self-centered and selfish, always treating my mother badly. I listened in to the conversation, which was when I discovered that they preferred the ex-girlfriend over my mom. They told my mother to accept the child or risk losing everything. I could not let my mother be treated like that, so I went into the room, where I saw my father, and he did not look me in my eyes. But if he had, he would have just seen how disappointed I was. He had not spoken even once, but when he saw me, he tried to talk to me. I told them to stop harassing my mother. I knew they were older than me and my mom had taught me manners, but there was no way I was going to let them speak like that to my mother. They said that they were trying to help me so that the family stayed together. It was ridiculous in how they were defending my father's betrayal, even saying that it did not count because it happened on a break. I think they were trying to prevent a divorce because then my mom would get most of my dad's money. They ended up leaving to let my mother and father speak. I've never heard them shouting at each other like this. My mother refused to accept the girl into our lives, but my father said he would not abandon his daughter just like that. He had been absent for years and wanted to make up for the lost time. He begged my mom to just try to accept the girl. But my mother said that of all people he had to cheat on her with, it was that woman. I did not know the woman at the time, but I really grew to hate her. For what it seemed like hours, they were screaming at each other, and now they've gotten to the point where they were airing each other's dirty laundry. He accused her of estranging him from his family, which was madness, because my mother has been nothing but nice to his family. And then there was a silence. I went to check up on my mom and ask her what was going on. She pretty much collapsed and said that it was probably over between her and Dad. This was difficult to even comprehend. Not so long ago, we were a happy family. Sometimes I wonder if being honest was the best thing that I did. I don't know. I just want my family back to how it used to be. I finally saw my mother and the woman my dad cheated on me with. I was shocked for a bit and did not know what to do. Lydia, my dad's ex, said that I looked exactly like my mother in a way that was a bit mocking. My half-sister, on the other hand, was not nice to me at all. She said that she would have everything that I had for years. I was confused about what she meant. She said that since I had pretty much burned bridges with my dad, she was going to ask him to put her in his will. I left without responding, and I've not heard from my dad, except for one time when I saw him shopping with them. I cannot help but think that they are using him for money. That woman gives me bad vibes, and she seems to be everywhere now. My mom has been a closed book, not telling me anything, but I think she wants to divorce my dad. Just a few days ago, she took all my dad's clothes and threw them on the lawn for all the neighbors to see. She's also been drinking a lot. My parents have always had a solid marriage, and from what I heard during their arguments, they went through some terrible times too, but this was the worst. I just feel so bad for some of the people involved in this story. Even if the father was showing a ton of red flags, it's still a horrible situation to be in, and I feel like OP went through so much dealing with this. The fact that she was the one to catch him, the fact that she was the one to tell her mother, who, by the way, has been hysterical and breaking down ever since. I was reading this original story, and I did come across an update for this. It's a very small one, but it says, Dad and Mom are now living apart and have decided to divorce. Dad may not marry the ex-girlfriend after all because, apparently, she's toxic and manipulative. But she will receive half or more of Father's inheritance. Her daughter is yelling and ranting our family on Facebook and her Instagram story, and I'll probably go no contact with Dad for this drama. Guys, if there's any update for this story, you will be the first to know for the channel. I hope everyone has an amazing day. I hope you enjoyed the content. Consider subscribing, and just so you guys know, I'm starting a separate YouTube channel that will display even more stories daily. Some of the stories are more Karen related or stories that are too long or too short to be on this animated main channel. Anyways, that'll be down in the description below. I will have daily videos like I said, so check that out. Subscribe to it as well. I hope you guys have an amazing night, and I'll see you tomorrow.